We now have the candidates for District Attorney, and we will start with the incumbent, Jerry Gorman.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for having us here this evening and conducting this forum. As Mr. Bland said, my name is Jerome A. Gorman. I go by Jerry Gorman. I am your Wyandotte County District Attorney. I have been your District Attorney for the past 11 and a half years. Prior to that, I was an Assistant District Attorney for 23 years. I was trained under Nick Tomasic. Most of you know Nick. Held the office for 32 years. I became his Senior Trial Attorney or Chief Trial Attorney. As an Assistant District Attorney, and then moving into the office of District Attorney, I learned that there were three very important qualities of a District Attorney: experience, leadership, and integrity. In the area of experience, I have tried more jury trials than any active prosecutor in the state of Kansas, over 400 jury trials. Of those 400 jury trials, 45 of those have been homicide cases. Again, more homicide cases that I've tried to jury than any active prosecutor in the state of Kansas. I've also defended those convictions that I've obtained. I've written more than 175 briefs to the appellate courts of Kansas, and I've argued those briefs and defended those convictions before the Kansas Supreme Court and the Kansas Court of Appeals. I've been a Wyandotte County resident my entire life. I have been a Wyandotte County attorney my entire life. My opponent is a Johnson County attorney, even presently, as his office and his registration with the Kansas Supreme Court is in Johnson County. In my 12 years, in my 12th year as District Attorney, we've created programs to help first victims, and we've also created programs to help defendants. Project Safe Celebrate, to help students, seniors in high school, celebrate graduation and prom safely, to avoid alcohol and to avoid the fear of date rape. We've expanded a truancy program in the public schools, where every week during the school sessions, one of my attorneys is appearing in the public schools talking about truancy and presenting the truancy program. And they present it in English and Spanish. We've begun a collaboration to protect the children against physical abuse and sexual abuse. This collaboration that meets monthly in our office is with Sunflower House. That's, if you've never heard of it, it's a local children's advocacy center that works with Wyandotte and Johnson County. MOXA, the Metropolitan Organization Against Sexual Assault, Children's Mercy Hospital, and the Division of Family Services, DFS, which was formerly known as SRS here in Kansas. We work with all of those to protect the children. We've also done things to protect the streets here in Wyandotte County. We've created a diversion program, and I'm proud of that because that diversion program, in the 4 years that we've had it, has returned $177,000 to victims here in Wyandotte County. And I was DA when times were tough in Wyandotte County, when there was no money in the budget, when they were furloughing individuals, employees. And I had to look my employees in the eye and say, there's no money in the budget, you're going to get furloughed and you won't get paid. And I took that furlough myself, even though by law I didn't have to. And even though they were furloughed, the police department was out there 24/7 protecting citizens, and my employees were on call 24/7, and they responded to incidents that were in the community day and night. I am proud that I've raised a generation of lawyers that have gone through the office. As a matter of fact, of the judicial candidates this year, and including my opponent, 5 of those 7 have worked under my direction in the Wyandotte County District Attorney's office. I believe that we've done a good job in the District Attorney's office. I believe that there are still more good things to come, and I would ask for your vote on August 2nd.
Okay. And now we'll ask for introductory remarks from Mark Dupree.
Thank you, and I appreciate you for hosting this event tonight. It's always good to come back to the very school that I was at. Likewise, I appreciate all of you for being here. I was born and raised here in Wyandotte County. Went to Wyandotte High School. My parents have been pastors here in the inner city for the last 30 years. I've been a minister under their leadership for the last 20 years. I love Wyandotte County. I've lived here my entire life. But what I am sick and tired of is the crime that occurs in Wyandotte County. It's almost as if there's two different worlds. There's a crime dot, and there's this other great, wonderful county that only a certain few get to live in. I believe that when you live in Wyandotte, you ought to feel safe from 1st Street to 143rd Street. And I believe that the people who are in office are to serve everyone, to make the entire county safe. Now, why am I running for district attorney? I'm running because I want to serve this community. When I graduated from Washburn Law School, I came over to Jackson County, Missouri, and I prosecuted over there for a little less than a year. And during that, I left and then came over here to Kansas, where I worked as a public defender in Johnson County, Kansas, where I received nothing but felony cases. After I left there, after 3 years, my wife, who was in the audience, who's the mother of all 4 of my beautiful babies, we opened up our own law practice, where I do nothing but criminal law. And when we opened up that law practice, it started out with her doing family law, and with me doing criminal law in both Jackson, Johnson, and Wyandotte. And that very list that some of the judges, candidates were talking about to work for the indigent, I was on. And I was on, why? Because they allowed me to use my house as my office. You know, when you're starting out in private practice, you don't have a lot of money. And so I used my office as my house. And then I had an office in Johnson County because I started out there. So let's be clear on this. In private practice, I've worked in over 10 jurisdictions. I've lived here my whole life. And then when I decided a couple years ago I was going to go ahead and run for office, my wife said, "Baby, you can't put my home address on that candidate stuff. You better go get an office." So I did. But don't be mistaken. I'm a Wyandotte County lawyer. Now, here's the reality. I appreciate my colleague for what he's done, and he's right. I served as an intern in his office when I was in law school. And when I graduated, I found out that I hadn't met a lawyer. I grew up off of 11th and Richmond. First time I met a lawyer was 14 years old, and it was the late Cordell Meeks. And I went to Wyandotte High School, and I grew up here. If I, who was the son of a pastor, who was educated, didn't meet a lawyer until I was 14, how many other youth in the inner city hadn't? So I went to Jerry and I said, let's create a legal shadow day program. And he said, go ahead, on your dime. So I got with District 500 and they transported the students. And for the last 6 years, in the DA's office, I brought District 500 students every year to his office. Why? Because I believe that exposing young people to a different side of reality, then there could be a difference. It's not just about prosecuting and litigating in court. It's about being involved. The initiatives that I'm bringing forth is a veterans court. I believe that our veterans deserve better. They go and they fight war and then they come back here. And then when they commit low-level nonviolent offenses, I'm saying we need to connect with the VA, who will partner with us if we go and talk with them. Just like in Jackson County and in Johnson County, they'll give them a mentorship where they will partner with them, and once they complete the program, they can be diverted and not in jail and receive the resources that they need. Likewise, a mental health diversion. We don't have that in Wyandotte County. A mental health diversion, right now, 40% of the folks in the Wyandotte County Jail have been diagnosed with mental health illnesses. And what do? We lock them up, we release them. They stay in 5, 10 days. It costs $92 per day that we house someone. And then to medicate those that are in the custody, we spend an additional $30,000 a month. I believe that my incumbent friend has done the best that he could with what he had. And his 35 years that he put in play here, I wasn't there in the 1970s when it was as bad as what he's talking about. And I'm glad for what he's done. But to go forward, to move forward, where the rest of the country are utilizing these evidence-based programs, these treatment initiatives, these programs that deal with the young people and deal with the underlying issues and not just simply locking them up, letting them out, locking them up, letting them out. We need someone who's willing to do it, who's willing to try something new. I've been a lawyer for 8 years. I've tried cases. I've tried over 50 jury trials. I haven't tried 400. Again, I wasn't in the 70s. But moving forward, it is not about what the problem is. It is about what the solution is. And if we don't come to a point where there is a problem, we can never reach a solution. And my opponent is not acknowledging that there's crime dot. He's never heard of it. It doesn't happen. The police are doing the best that they can. They're arresting and they're locking people up. And in the last 18 months, 1,100 cases were not filed by my colleague. For whatever reason. Maybe lack of evidence, maybe not enough, who knows? What we do know is that for every case that's not filed, that's a victim that goes without justice. That's 1,100 victims that are not dealt with. And on one specific occasion, one was charged with a felony in possession with a gun. That person goes in, and within 48 hours, he was released and not charged. Within 6 months, he murdered someone. And he was just sentenced last month on a plea of second-degree murder. I still don't believe the family knows that he was supposed to be locked up. How many lives can we save if we simply try? Just try. I commend him for what he's done, but Wyandotte deserves better, and we can do better. But we need someone who's willing to try. Thank you.
Let's move to the questions now. Deborah?
Okay, I'll start with Mr. Gorman. Sometimes voters don't really look at the candidates. You know, they pick a name, maybe because they've seen that name before. Tell us what kind of qualities or what should we be looking for in the candidate who's running for district attorney? What should they have, like, to do this job? What do you need? Maybe just a couple of examples.
Well, as I said in my opening statement, there are 3 characteristics that I believe that any prosecutor should have: experience, leadership, and integrity. The experience comes from years of doing the cases, being in the trenches, being in the courtroom, of which I've done, and you've heard those numbers. The leadership comes from having a staff and training that staff. You know, Wyandotte County is a great training ground. Prosecutors' offices from all across the state, and even the federal courts, and even Mr. Moore's city attorney's office, come to my office and hire our prosecutors away because they have experience and they've been trained well, and under my leadership. And then the last thing is integrity. Prosecutors should be able to look you in the eye and tell you what the truth is. And I've sat across the table from many a victim and have done that in my 35 years as a prosecutor.
Thank you. Mr. Dupree, kind of on the same question, but I know you're coming in and you're wanting to make some changes. So as a candidate, what would be some characteristics that you think they should vote for, and what would you like to change?
I would say 2 things, well, multiple things. One, passion. Passion. I think anyone that sits in this seat should have passion. Not for the job, not for the check, but for the people. The second thing is I think you should look for the servant's heart in the position. For the last 20 years, I've been a minister here. I haven't prosecuted a murder case. I've defended it. I've had to stare in the eyes of many families, not just in the courtroom, but over funeral caskets, because their child was gunned down in ridiculous violence. I've had to watch parents come to our church to be ministered to and ask, what am I to do? How can we resolve this? So what do we look for? We look for someone who is doing this because they desire to serve. And I do not believe that you can serve a people as the district attorney or in any position unless you have an ear for the people. What should you look for? You should look to see how many communities of which they're serving, they're actually listening to, they're actually representing. This is a servant's job, and you have to serve the entire community, not just parts and pieces of it, which means being involved with the organizations, being involved with the things that they do, talk to them, listen to them, know the families in the neighborhood groups, not just on election time, not just when you got opposition, but be involved in ministry and be involved with helping and doing this without being paid. Because that's how you know your community. The trenches is not the courtroom. The trenches is the community. And if we're not in the community, then they do not deserve to sit in a servant's seat.
Thank you. Mr. Gorman, is there some changes on the state or federal level that you would like to see, maybe that would help you make some of your convictions on some of the homicides? Is there some things there that maybe stop you from pursuing some of the cases?
Well, the biggest change that I'd like to see is funding. Funding from the state is not very good. It's gone down. We've all heard earlier this evening with some of the Senate and representatives about what's happened with the economy of the state. So funding is down, and that hurts in mental health funding. Many people are committing crimes because they do suffer from some form of mental health. If the funding would be there to assist individuals before they ever commit a crime, would be of great assistance. The second area that is frustrating to me is in the area of, again, funding, but it involves bed space in prisons. And we're told constantly that if we want to have a new crime passed by the legislature, we got to look at how many beds it's going to take up, because if it takes up too many beds, then we're not going to pass it, no matter how much it might protect citizens. And that's frustrating to me. I've talked with the chief of police just the other day. He's proposing an armed criminal action law, which is similar to what Missouri has. I'm afraid that when it gets to the legislature, though, that they're going to look at it and say, no, it's going to take too many bed spaces. We're not going to pass that. So funding for mental health, funding for bed space would be two of the biggest areas that I think would be of assistance by the state and the federal government.
A follow-up question on that is, do you have the numbers of mental health that are causing some of these issues with the arrests? Do you know, like, how many cases are mental health, how many are like on the violent crime side of it?
What I can tell you is this, that there are presently, it's just under 400 people that are incarcerated in the Wyandotte County Jail. The number fluctuates, of course, but between 30 and 40% of those suffer from severe mental illness, to the point where they're taking psychotropic drugs. They're being administered or seen by a psychiatrist in the jail and are taking their medications on a daily basis. So you figure 30-40% of that population is a significant number. Now, booked into the Wyandotte County Jail, there are about 12,000 bookings in a year. Not all of those are in district court, where I serve as a district attorney. Many of those are in municipal court. Matter of fact, probably about 3/4 or 7/8 of them are municipal court. And those crimes that are committed, misdemeanor crimes, many of those are committed by individuals that suffer from mental illness. Now, I know Mr. Dupree says that we needed to have a mental illness diversion. We actually have one. And we have been placing severe and persistent mental illness individuals into that for the last 6 to 9 months in Wyandotte County. So that's one of our biggest areas.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dupree, what are some of the things that you feel that the state or federal laws may be hampering in the prosecution of some of the homicide cases?
Well, I would agree, we need more funding. That is completely clear. I think you do need that. But I also think that the district attorney plays a major part in preventing crime, him or herself. And I don't think that funding is the only thing that can determine that. I believe that if we put in place proactive policies within the office, then we can attack in a preventative way. One of the things that I want to create is a community prosecutors unit. This community prosecutors unit will allow prosecutors, in fact, to be a part and be invested in the community where they grew up, where they have an invested interest, where they actually are part of, and allow them to get to know the folks in that community. Here's one of the biggest things that we run into when we're dealing with crime and murders and lack of convictions in that area, which in Wyandotte County, we do have the lowest felony trial conviction rate in the state of Kansas for our size, which is 60%. And so 2015, 40% of the cases we took to trial on the felony level, we either lost or we got a hung jury, which means that our tax dollars had to pay for them again, okay? And so one of the reasons why that occurs is because of a lack of trust when it comes to the community. The police absolutely complain, hey, look, I can't get this witness to come forward. I can't get this witness to do this. Well, here's the problem. When there is no connection with the community, if they see Johnny, who just committed a crime, picked up and taken into custody, and within 48 hours, before the detective can come back and talk to the witness, Johnny is back on the streets because we didn't file charges because it wasn't a murder, because it wasn't a rape. So now that person gets called by the police or the detective, hey, talk to me about this crime. Well, I see Johnny who just did the crime across the street. Guess what, Mr. Detective? I'm not talking. And so the district attorney goes to the courtroom without the witnesses that they need, without the evidence that they need. Well, there's a lack of trust. Here's the deal. We cannot pretend as though there's not a problem. There's a story, a little boy went to his mama, touched the car, and the car didn't work. The little boy looked at his mama and said, Mama, car doesn't run. Mama looked back at the boy and said, yeah, it doesn't run. Problem is, we got a lot of folks who's looking at Wyandotte County and said, there's a lot of crime, it doesn't work. But what we need is a mechanic. What we need is someone who's not just gonna say it doesn't work. Someone who's not just gonna say there's crime, but someone who says, what's the solution? Yeah, you may not like me. Yeah, he doesn't agree that I got as much experience. So what? But tell me the solution. People are dying, and every case is a family. So what can the state do? Give us more money. But what can we do? We can change policy. We can get involved in our community, put our prosecutors, we say that they have to live here to work in our office, then let them be involved in the community. Let them in the schools. Let them be a part of the organizations. And just maybe, we build a relationship and a rapport that will be able to carry the ball once the police and their community policing unit brings it to us. We don't fumble the ball, but we take it to the touchdown because we have the community support. That's what I would offer.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
We want to move to concluding remarks. Please limit these to 1 minute, and we'll start with Jerry Gorman.
Thank you. Again, I've trained my entire professional career to be a prosecuting attorney. Mr. Dupree talks about 1,100 cases that we haven't filed. You know, they're standards, and we can't ignore as lawyers those standards. And the lawyer standards say, you don't file a case unless there is evidence to show beyond a reasonable doubt. What people don't understand is that police can arrest upon one standard called probable cause. And they try to put that case together, and they do a dang good job, and we work with them every day. But if they can't put the case together to reach beyond a reasonable doubt, I can't file that case. And if I do, and even if Mr. Dupree comes in and does it, then the disciplinary administrator speaker is going to take our license. We have to follow rules, and if we don't follow rules, then we have something like, what, Ferguson, or something like that. We get blamed of being unfair. We have to be fair in our prosecutions. I'm a lifelong Dot. I grew up in the inner city at 8th and Pacific. I was the son of our grandson of Polish and Croatian immigrants who worked in the meatpacking houses. I learned hard work. I go to work every day, and I love what I do. In my work with the police departments, the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department, FOP, has endorsed my candidacy. The Wyandotte County Sheriff's Department, FOP, has endorsed my candidacy. The last 4 police chiefs in Kansas City, Kansas, Ron Miller, Ellen Hansen, Sam Brashears, and Rick Armstrong, have all endorsed my candidacy to be or continue to be the district attorney. I think that any district attorney needs to be able to look the people in the eye, and they need to show that they have integrity. And this is what I will tell you, looking you all in the eye. I will say, as the chief law enforcement officer of Wyandotte County, that I have never been arrested for any crime, that I have never been charged with any crime. I have never pled guilty to, nor have I been found guilty by any judge or jury of any crime. And most importantly, I have never expunged anything off of my record at any time. The chief prosecutor should be able to say that to you, and I say it all to you tonight. I ask you for your vote on August 2nd.
Mark?
This is what I'll say in closing, that it's important that the prosecutor is not simply reactive, but that the prosecutor is proactive, that the prosecutor is involved in the community to help the police make the community safer, to protect and to serve. The police is supposed to work in partnership with the community and with the district attorney's office. And if that partnership lacks, then crime occurs. And right now, it is lacking the community and the district attorney's office. And where there is no connection, where there is no innovative work to make the community better, then it doesn't work. When I was 18 years old, University of Kansas, had just left here and I was in my first year in undergrad. I had a unique opportunity. I was the chaplain of the choir, I was on honor roll, the dean knew me. I was about to go to the United States Senate to intern with the senator. And I came home and I went to a movie in Johnson County. And this is what a district attorney does. He doesn't throw out stuff, he asks the question. And when I went in there, I was accused of stealing a ticket. And then I was beat by 6 officers. You talk about wanting to make things better. After I was beat by 6 officers, I didn't allow that to grow root inside of me and to hate the criminal justice system. I went to jury trial because, having been a prosecutor and a defense, I understood that there's 2 sides to the law. And to really get justice, you have to know them both, which I can say because I've done them both. And after went to that trial, I was found guilty of trespass and of not leaving when the officer said. But battery against a police officer, the judge threw it out in a bench trial. Fighting an officer, The judge threw it out. And you know what I did? I didn't sue the police. My colleague did, and he won. You talk about Ferguson, he just throws it right out there. The issue is, it is not about what you can say, but it's about what you can do. I understand what it is to serve people. And the reason why I will make a great prosecuting attorney is the same reason I made a good defense lawyer, because I've sat in the seat. And I understand that justice is not about a conviction, but justice is about equality and fairness. And when you file a charge against a person, it is your job as the chief law enforcement officer to make sure you know what you're doing, or else we waste taxpayers' money. Or else we continue to allow the systematic racism that occurs in the criminal justice system to seep in because we just say stuff. If we want better in Wyandotte, it's time out for just playing the surface. It's time out for just connecting. No, I didn't get the FOP. My neighbor is not the president of that FOP. No, I didn't get the sergeants over there. I didn't grow up with senators in my family or whomever else. I grew up off of 11th and Richmond, and I seen a drive-by shooting at 8 years old, and my daddy told me, son, just pray. And after I became a lawyer, he said, now you do something about it. And in this capacity, after much prayer, God said, you run for this. And so let's be clear. I am running this race because I believe God told me to do it. I'm not running against Jerry. I know I'm making him mad and a whole bunch of folk that like him, but if saving one life is what I can accomplish by taking this position, then everyone that I upset, including my dear colleague, it's been worth it to that family who I helped. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give the candidates a hand.